The stranger in plain sight. He walked past us 1,000 times. We thought he was one of us. A tradesman. A quiet son. Another pair of shoulders hunched beneath empire and law and ordinary days. He didn't arrive wrapped in thunder, no halo carved from lightning. No royal announcement. Just skin. Dust. A name too common to echo in palaces. We had imagined God differently. If the Almighty would ever visit, we pictured sky-wide arrivals. A voice louder than oceans. Power so vivid it would scorch our eyelids just to glimpse him. But when he came, he looked like someone's neighbor. Someone's cousin. Someone we would forget by evening. And so, we did forget him. Or worse, we never noticed him at all. He came from a village they joked about. From people without titles, without thrones. His hands bore no rings, only calluses. And we were too conditioned by sparkle and spectacle to see the fire hidden beneath ordinary skin. We had prayed for salvation. But when it walked beside us, gentle, unguarded, wearing the quiet, our eyes were closed by expectation. We missed the miracle because it didn't dress the way we thought miracles should. He was the stranger in plain sight, and heaven, it was whispering right through him. Have you ever felt the weight of something Jesus already carried? The king we couldn't recognize. We expected royalty to look like victory, like triumph sculpted into flesh, tall, commanding, cloaked in gold. The kind of figure who shifts rooms just by entering. But when the king came, he wore no crown we could see. No guard, no fanfare, no empire trailing behind him. He walked dusty roads in borrowed sandals. He ate with callous fishermen, laughed with children whose names would never be recorded, and spoke with women no one else would notice. We saw this and shook our heads. Kings don't live like this. Kings don't lose. Kings don't let themselves be touched by lepers, mocked by cynics, or held by the broken. But he did, and that's why we missed him. Because when power arrived wrapped in poverty, when the Lord sat beside sinners instead of summoning angels, we couldn't recognize him. Our minds were too saturated with glory and dominance to perceive the deeper royalty that moved in humility. He spoke with authority that unsettled our bones. Not because he shouted, but because his words stripped the lies we had built our lives upon. Blessed are the poor. Love your enemies. Turn the other cheek. No king we knew would say such things. No throne we dreamed of ever made room for the crushed, the mourning, the persecuted. We stared at him, waiting for lightning, but he only looked back, kind, unwavering, as if to say, "You don't know what royalty is yet." We thought kings come to take power. This king came to give it away, and though the world still doesn't understand, the truth is, he redefined what a throne means. Not a seat of domination, but a cross of surrender. Not lifted by soldiers, but nailed by love. This was the king we couldn't recognize, because we didn't know what to look for. When heaven bleeds, it wasn't the nails that broke me. It was the silence. When they mocked him, he didn't retaliate. When they ripped the flesh from his back, he didn't curse them. When the crowd screamed for death, he absorbed every shout like a sponge soaked in fire. No resistance. No rage. Just breath drawn slowly through splinters. I always thought divinity meant invincibility. But there he was, the creator, crushed beneath the weight of his creation's hatred. Spit on by mouths he formed. Struck by hands he knit together in wombs. Stripped naked before the eyes he gave sight to. Heaven was bleeding in public. And we didn't even blink. We turned away. We walked past the hill like it was just another execution. We talked about taxes and weather and whose ox was stronger while the architect of galaxies hung between two criminals, his lungs collapsing under the weight of mercy. This was not a show of weakness. This was strength refusing to wear armor. The prophets had hinted at it. The Psalms had cried it out in shadows. Wounded for our transgressions. Bruised for our iniquities. But we read those lines like poetry, not prophecy. We never imagined it would look like a man gasping for air while soldiers gambled over his robe. And still, he stayed. He didn't summon fire. He didn't call down legions. He didn't make a scene. He made a sacrifice. I once asked myself why. Why would the author step into his own story and let the characters rip out the pages? Why would he, who lacked nothing, choose agony? And I saw it not in a vision, not in a voice, but in the way blood trails from wood. Because love never stays distant. Love does not send messengers. Love comes itself. And when heaven bleeds, it means heaven has drawn close. Close enough to carry what should have broken us. Close enough to let the nails pass through its own hands instead of ours. despised by the familiar. They knew his face too well to believe in it. Nazareth was a place where people measured each other by last names and trade skills, where your worth was tied to who your father was, not what your soul carried. So when Jesus stood up in the synagogue, unarmed, unpolished, uncredentialed, and spoke as if heaven itself had loaned him its breath, they laughed. They said, "Isn't this Joseph's son?" They couldn't see past the carpenter's apron. He had built tables for their kitchens, fixed their doors, maybe even played with their children. And now he claimed to carry the authority of eternity. It offended them, not because of what he said, but because of who he was or who they thought he was. We are slow to believe that greatness can come from the ordinary. Slower still to admit we've misjudged someone we thought we knew. So they did what wounded pride always does, they despised him. Familiarity breeds contempt, they say. And the most dangerous place to miss the divine is right next to it. It's easier to accept a savior from somewhere distant, someone with mystery and grandeur. But when God walks your streets and borrows your well water, it threatens your sense of control. It shatters the lines between sacred and daily. And so they rejected him, not because he failed their expectations, but because he exposed them. He showed them what love looked like when it wasn't filtered through tradition or fear. And it was too much, too close, too real. It is a strange ache to be rejected not by enemies, but by those who once called you brother. But he bore that ache. For them. For us. Because the one who saves the world must first survive being unseen by it. The weight of silence. They expected him to speak, to defend himself, to rise with righteous fury, to dismantle the accusations, to crush the lies with truth forged in thunder. But he said nothing. The judge of all the earth stood accused, and remained still. He did not flinch when they slapped him. He did not argue when they twisted his words. He did not protest when the crowd traded his name for Barabbas. The silence was not weakness, it was a burden. He carried it like a stone inside his lungs. Most of us cannot bear a moment of being misunderstood. We rush to explain, to justify, to plead for clarity. But he bore the full weight of false judgment and chose silence. Why? Because some truths are too holy to be shouted. Because some battles are not won by volume, but by surrender. The Lamb did not need to roar. His silence was not emptiness, it was strategy. It was prophecy. It was power hidden in restraint. Every unspoken word thundered in heaven's courtroom. His silence gave shape to mercy. And when Pilate stared into his eyes and asked, "Don't you hear them? Don't you have anything to say?" he remained quiet, because he knew who he was. And when you know who you are, you don't need to perform for those who've already made up their minds. There is a kind of strength this world does not understand. A quiet that breaks chains louder than shouting ever could. A calm that refuses to mirror violence. A savior who saves not by shouting down his enemies, but by absorbing the very hatred meant to destroy him. So the silence deepened. Not because he was afraid, but because he was finishing a sentence that had started before time began. The wound that healed the world, it should have been us. The wrath, the weight, the shame, we earned it. With every selfish choice, every crooked motive, every time we said, "My will, not yours." Justice had a case against us so airtight, even angels held their breath. But instead of judgment, we got a substitute. Instead of punishment, we saw a man step forward, eyes steady, spine unshaken. He didn't negotiate. He didn't hesitate. He simply stepped into the sentence and said, "I will carry this." And carry it he did. Not just the cross, but our guilt, our sickness, our failures too twisted to name out loud. He absorbed what should have fractured us. And in that moment, under skies darkened like closed eyes, the most brutal exchange in history took place. He was wounded so we could be whole. He was pierced so we could be mended. Not metaphorically, not in theory, but in scars and blood and breath that staggered beneath the weight of our redemption. And here's the strange beauty of it all. The place where he bled became the place where healing began. The very wounds that marked his suffering now mark our freedom. His stripes, the lash of injustice, became the doorway to restoration. He didn't just patch us up. He remade us from the inside out. This isn't a myth. This isn't a symbol. This is the deep reversal that split history in half, where death tried to win and found its hands full of resurrection. So when you wonder if God sees you, look at the scars. When you wonder if grace is real, trace the wound that healed the world. inheritance of the rejected. He was cut off. No descendants, no monument, no eulogy from priests or kings. Just a tomb borrowed, sealed, and silent. But that wasn't the end. Because what looked like the final chapter was only the pause between promise and fulfillment. The one who was rejected by men became the cornerstone for a kingdom without walls. And here's the scandal of grace: the inheritance he earned didn't go to the powerful, not to the religious elite, not to the ones who always followed the rules. It went to the lost, the misfits, the outsiders, the brokenhearted and bruised, those who never thought they'd be chosen, now called sons and daughters, those who wandered, now given a home, those who were disqualified, now sealed with a promise written in eternal ink. He bore our shame, so we could wear his name. He took our exile, so we could be called heirs. The world had no room for him, so he made room for us. And now, the ones once despised, dismissed, and forgotten stand with open hands, receiving an inheritance paid for in blood, signed with resurrection. This is the upside-down kingdom, where rejection becomes royalty, where the last are welcomed first, where grace writes names into a book that cannot be erased. Unbreakable Covenant. He made a promise, not like ours, fragile, mood-driven, easily erased. His covenant wasn't written in ink that fades or paper that tears. It was forged in suffering, sealed in blood, and anchored beyond time. He swore by himself, not because we were faithful, but because he is. He saw our inconsistency, our doubts, our betrayals. And still, he said, "I will not leave you." When we ran, he chased. When we forgot, he remembered. When we failed, he remained. The mountains may tremble, the earth may crack beneath our feet, but his mercy? Unmoved. His love doesn't expire. His grace doesn't dim with age. And no weapon formed against his people, no storm, no slander, no scheme can undo what he declared from the cross: "It is finished." He didn't promise an easy road. He promised himself. And that's the vow that holds us. Not a contract, a covenant. Not a deal we made, but a mercy we live in. Forever unbreakable. Forever his. If this touched your heart, if something in this story reached you, even just a whisper in your soul, don't let it fade. Let it stir you. Let it remind you you are not forgotten. You are not beyond grace. You are seen, pursued, and loved by a king who wore no crown but thorns. And if this touched your heart, help share this. Like, comment, subscribe, not for numbers, but so this message reaches someone else who needs it.